Welcome in. It's Ethan, the Easy Coach, and tonight we're going to talk about difficult coworkers and bad bosses, a topic lots of people have questions about. So, appreciate everybody coming in. An early happy 4th of July coming up. We already have Ed in chat who's making my life fun. He's talking about how he's apparently got a lot of experience either with bad bosses or difficult coworkers, maybe both. So I know a lot of you who are here right when we start are familiar with the show, but just as a few refreshers, number one, yeah, what if I'm both? Actually, we're going to talk about that. I am both a bad boss and sometimes a difficult coworker, and I'm going to be honest about that. And that'll be my story here to lead us in a minute. But if you're not familiar with the show, we run on a Q&A basis. So I'll give a little intro. I'll talk about some of the stuff I've learned. But basically, then we do question and answer. And you can share your questions in the widget that should be on your screen if you're watching in a web browser on PC. The moderators will chuck in the link where you can ask questions off mobile if that's easier for you. And then you can vote on the questions of others. And I need you to vote because I answer questions in the order of popularity on what you'd like to talk about. And that way I know what you're interested in. So this is a good topic because everyone struggled with a difficult coworker. It's also fun. I thought before the holiday weekend, this would be a good stream to talk about some of the difficulties and some of the war stories of really hard to deal with people. You'll have to share those in chat maybe. But I always remind people when I speak here, I'm speaking for myself. I work for Amazon. I used to work closely with Twitch. Now I run Twitch Prime. But I don't speak for Amazon or Twitch when I'm here. So the other thing I'll share coming up, hopefully all of you have seen the announcement of Prime Day happening in a couple weeks. I will be off the air for 2 weeks while we go and run some Twitch Prime events around Apex Legends and FIFA. The FIFA event in London on July 13th and Apex Legends in Las Vegas July 11th to July 13th. And I'll probably share some photos and updates from that when I come back. We're going to have some good guests. And even though I don't normally talk about Twitch too much, I'll share some of that so we have some fun. Okay. What else can we talk about here? So, bad bosses. I thought about this a lot. And I wanted to give you guys a chance to start putting questions into chat. I went back and counted. And over the course of my career, I've had about 20 managers. Hey, the Rex. Good to see you. Always our middle of the night guy coming in from Hamburg. Might be he gets the award for most dedicated viewer because he's up in the middle of the night. Or, he actually lives down the street in Tacoma and just doesn't admit it. I don't know. Anyway, I believe he's probably in Hamburg, Germany. So I've had about 20 managers over my career, and I did a little work, and I divided them tonight just for my own edification. How many of them were good bosses? How many of them were kind of neutral? And how many of them did I struggle with? I'm going to be very polite and circumspect here because this ends up on YouTube. And if any of the folks I struggled with find it, I love you all dearly. We just didn't see eye to eye perfectly. So, what I wanted to say about that though, and I've got my little cheat sheet here with my list of managers. For the 5 managers that were really good, they all had the same traits. They were all supportive and we matched stylistically. For the 5 managers that were not as good, they had different issues. And I'll give this as a prompt, what issues do you want to talk about? So two of them simply didn't understand the technology of the business. I worked in both cases in tech businesses, and they just didn't get it, which made it really hard to work with someone who just didn't understand what we did. One boss said, I want a lot. Didn't matter if it was realistic or not. I want this. I want that. I want. That's great. But he started virtually every sentence with, I want. Hey, Lotan. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. And I hope you enjoy the stream. One boss was simply unpredictable. Like, you had no idea what he was going to decide. And so you were always guessing and you couldn't act on that basis. And then one boss was always managing up. His focus was always on what his boss wanted, to the degree that often anytime we asked for feedback, he would say, well, what will insert the boss's name think? And eventually the people who worked for him got very frustrated, which was like, well, what do you think? Do you have any opinion of your own, or is your only opinion what your boss thinks? So I can talk about any of those. Let's talk about some stories, though, about where I've been a bad boss. And I want to share those because no boss is perfect. And we're going to talk about how to deal with that. And also, by the way, I have a list of difficult coworkers I'll share. But story number one. Some of you have heard this in another context long ago on performance reviews. I was managing a guy early in my career. I was a brand new manager. Probably it was difficult because I was younger than the guy I was managing. And so that's always hard, right? You've got some kid, in his estimation, telling you what to do. That's a crappy place to be. Just from a dignity viewpoint, it can be hard to think, well, this person who hasn't been working as long as me is now my boss. Like, that's not fair. Who knows what he thought? But what I did is, it came time for his performance review. And yeah, I see that's you right now in chat. It's a tough situation. You want to be respectful. Our society normally tries to respect elders. And yeah, it does hit people's ego. And ego is a big part. All we're going to be talking about here, right, dealing with difficult coworkers and bad bosses, is all about working with people that you don't have a good relationship with them. You can't relate to them on their level, or they don't want to relate to you, and you're disconnected. So people's ego really matters. We'd like to think that everyone at a workplace is a professional. But very few people are true professionals and can deal with anyone under all circumstances. So with this fellow that I was managing, I gave him a performance review. And I've told this part of the story before, so I'll hurry through it a little bit. I gave a very insightful performance review, I think, that called out these places he could improve. Unfortunately, he didn't want to improve them. That's who he was, and he liked what he was doing. Or maybe he just decided I was too much of a jerk and too young. What the hell did I know? I don't know what was going on in his mind. But I know by trying to tell him, you can change this, you can change that, when he wasn't ready to hear it, I became a bad boss for him. And he hated me from that point forward. And it would be interesting now, it's been a long time, 20 years later, to have him on the show. I've lost track of him, but I could track him down and see what he would say about that interaction. Because all I know for sure is that I was very difficult for him. So that's a case where you can have a difficult boss. Maybe I was wrong in his eyes. Maybe I was arrogant, almost certainly, by the way. Maybe I was giving him advice he didn't want or not enough praise. But I think the fundamental was he just didn't feel I had the standing to do that. And so the takeaway here is relationship really matters. I think if we had had a more trusting relationship, I would have better read him like this isn't who he is. He doesn't want to improve or doesn't want to change these things. And he's not ready to hear this from me. So that's probably the number one thing is when you're communicating with a coworker and you're about to make a suggestion or with a boss, make sure they want to hear it or that they can hear it, at least that they can politely hear it. I see some people are voting up questions in chat. Very much appreciate that. I see the audience is coming in. Welcome to the show if you've just joined. We're talking about difficult coworkers and bad bosses. And right now we're talking about me as a bad boss. I'm going to share one more story and then we'll go to the questions. And yeah, I see there in chat, is there a certain way you need to ask a question? There is. The moderators can help you with that. And if you can't ask the question, they'll copy them in for you. So the second story I'll tell is much more recent. And it's me as scary boss. No surprise if you listen to me here, I'm loud. I happen to be a little bit over 6'2", so I'm big. I'm also very enthusiastic. You don't always see it here on the show. You see it more when I'm in Awesome Dave's studio and I'm standing up, and I tend to talk a lot with my hands. And I get my hands shaking and I get loud, and not everyone loves that. And when I'm excited, I can be a bad boss for people who like things quiet. Macaroni Man, thank you for following. So in that situation, the point is recognize that you are not the easiest person to work with yourself. And so part of what I want to share in this stream is we're all the difficult coworker for somebody else. And if you are a manager, you're the bad boss for somebody else. So just consider trying not to be that, or at least to be aware. And we're going to talk about some tools as questions come up, what we can do. So with that, those are my two stories. I see there's a question, it's several questions that have got a lot of votes. So I'm going to jump straight to those because I love to do the interactivity. And we'll chat about the questions. And then if you guys need more prompts for topics, we'll come back to them. We're also going to do a couple of fun things tonight that are interactive. So first question here, there it is. How do you handle, and by the way, I haven't pre-thought about these. This just came in, so we're winging it. How do you handle a manager who thinks he knows what he's talking about, but actually does not, and therefore gives bad objectives? How do you tell them they're wrong in a polite way? Great question. So, number one, don't try and do it in public in front of an audience unless you have a really good relationship with that manager. If you have any choice at all, wait until it's in private. Second, if you can, don't just make it my opinion versus your opinion. Make it based on data or something objective. So if you have any way to prove that maybe it's a bad idea, or you can bring a second person, yeah, use data. Exactly what the Rex 243 said. Use data. And that's a key. And Rex, I see you talking about leadership and self-deception. We're going to talk about that book in a little while. If I don't get back to it towards the end of the hour, bring it up again because I want to hit it, and I'm going to share that with everyone. But, and therefore, if they're giving bad objectives, try to have proof of that. If you do have to have a debate where it's opinion, try to bring multiple people. Yeah, somebody here says facts don't care about emotions. So at Amazon, we do try and have a saying, which is data always wins. Data is should be objective. Now remember, There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can make data say anything you want, but if you're honest, do it that way. Try and use data and try and get people. Don't spin the data, but try and show it. Chat says, don't oppose their view, question their opinion in a way that makes them open to the possibility they're wrong. I absolutely agree. Try to ask questions. Try not to ask the questions, but instead ask, try to ask something that will get at their reasoning. Hey, why do you believe this? Another really powerful question is, we don't see it that way, or I don't see it that way. What would help you believe that there's another way to do it? Or what would help you believe, what would it take to convince you? You give them a hypothetical and open. You're not saying change your mind. You're saying, hey, what sort of evidence would lead you to a different conclusion? Or what would you need to see to believe what I'm saying? And Rex suggests the Socratic method. The Socratic method, probably a lot of you know, but for anybody who doesn't, the Socratic method is the idea that teach through questions. So Socrates had the idea of asking leading questions to bring people to a new understanding. And the challenge with that is bosses in particular can dislike being led by the nose places, and they can feel that the Socratic method, Socrates' issue with that method that makes it good for teaching, but only if you have someone willing to participate, is that the Socratic method, it's pretty obvious that Socrates, or you acting as Socrates, think you know the answer. And someone says, isn't that kind of manipulative? Yes, people can feel like you're talking down to them. So Socratic method's okay, and I use it some to teach for sure, but I often tell people, hey, I want to play Socrates here. Can I ask you a series of leading questions? If I were trying to convince a manager of something, I probably wouldn't do that. I'd instead ask them honest questions. So reviewing real quick, not in public, bring data, don't make it a confrontation if you can at all avoid it. Bring extra people or refer them to other experts and ask questions. Basically, the human ego must protect itself. And so if you ask questions in a way that's going to lead people to believe that they are being challenged, they have to step up and stick their ego in. And you just really don't want that. So try and avoid it. So let's see here. Rex243 already brought up my favorite book on this topic. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to it for a second. I'm going to bring up a web window real quick, and we'll talk about it real quick. And it's going to block over my face. I'll lean over here out of the side, but I blew it up real big so you can see it. And we'll take it down so it doesn't mask the question. For both difficult coworkers and challenging bosses, this is my favorite book. You can find it on my book list, which is the list of recommended books on the show. You'll see it's in fact book number 1. Rex is reading it. Leadership and Self-Deception will challenge you as a book, but the key it gets at is all the ways in which, like Socratic method, we piss people off by the way we interact with them because we're treating them as objects, as being in the way of our goal, rather than as people. And the human animal can feel when they're being treated as objects, not as people. And whether your arguments are good or not, oh, I need you to do this because of reason X, Y, and Z, they'll get pissed off and they'll push back against you because they feel that you're manipulating them. And so, look, I can't explain the whole book here. You've got some testimonies from people here in chat. If you want to get better at dealing with coworkers, read this book. Okay. I'm going to kill that window so it's not in the way. And let's see. We have some stuff in chat here. All right. AutoMod's really funny. It held Ed's message because it says you see X company, and it decided it was a message about sex. So Ed, clean it up. You can't see X company. You need to like see Y or Z company. Okay. A bit more context to the question I ask. In construction, you see company X or worker day to day on the same job site. All right. We'll get back to your questions here in a second. So I think we've answered this one. We'll get to your construction question, Ed, in a little bit, but thank you for being here. We're going to jump down to the next question in order, though, which is, what is the best way to deal with a coworker who is a crier? This is tough, right? If you go to the old Tom Hanks movie, there is no crying in baseball. Ideally, I guess there would be no crying in the workplace, but that's very unrealistic. Lots of people get upset. You can generalize this question to what do you do with someone who's really upset? But anytime you have an upset coworker, when someone is emotional, they're no longer thinking, they're feeling. And so if you have someone whose emotions are running away with them to the point where they can't control them, whether they're angry, whether they're crying, whether they're scared, you're going to have to help them manage those emotions because they're not in a place to be rational. And presuming that you're not looking for an emotional response, you're going to have to get them to a place where they can be comfortable. Basically, there's this idea that we all have our regular brain, and then I've talked about this a bit on Devin's show when I'm on the Nash Nation. There's something called an amygdala hijack. And the amygdala is the part of the brain in the back, also called the lizard brain, that basically controls your fight or flight instinct. And it's what's going to drive you when you're feeling emotionally scared, angry, upset. Well, it's called a hijack because the amygdala has the ability to dump your body full of chemicals that are meant to either have you kill the tiger or outrun it. And when you're getting ready to kill the tiger or outrun it, somebody says, can you define crier? Sorry, since I'm answering that question, I'll pause and do that. Crier means someone who, whenever you talk to them or work with them and it's upsetting, they start crying. So some people have learned to avoid bad news, or that they can control and manipulate coworkers by what we call turning on the waterworks. So you try and give them feedback they're not doing well, or that they can't have a day off, or that they need to change something, and they start crying. And so, yeah, somebody wants to learn that. Bring on the river of tears. It's obviously difficult. And when you do have someone in your office or a coworker who starts crying in your workplace, they're making themselves the center of attention, and they have a visible sign that you're a mean person. So it puts everything back on you. I've spent a little bit describing the hindbrain state. Bottom line is, you got to give people space, and you just ask them. It says, is it literally crying? Yes, some people absolutely literally cry. And Greasy Wheezy, yes, this is the coaching channel. So if you're crying, and if someone's crying, you basically have to give them space and say, do you need a few minutes to compose yourself? Do you want to come back and address this later? But you don't let them off the hook that they're going to have to address whatever the issue is. And so, any book recommendations on management psychology with the lizard brain, the hindbrain? I'll think about that. I don't have a perfect book on amygdala hijack. Maybe somebody in chat does. And I see Rex says pitch anything is one. So if somebody's crying, bottom line, the way you deal with a crier is you give them time to get prepared, if you can, and you say, we're going to have a conversation about this topic, and you let them get ahead of it. Hey, Devin. So Devin Nash is here. Always glad to have him. He brings the Nash Nation with him. Devin and I are going to be doing a show again together in a couple weeks on Monday the 22nd. We're going to go through a day in the life of my schedule. And so I'm going to bring in either a day or a week. And I will bring in a schedule from my workplace. I'll anonymize it, and we'll talk through a week of what it's like to do my job at Amazon, good and bad. I thought of it, and I really am going to answer the question with Devin, what the hell does the boss do all day? Because let's be honest, everyone has wondered that. What the hell does the boss do? Now, somebody here says, you don't want that type of coaching from Ethan. What, can you coach me on how to get rank 14 in World of Warcraft Classic? No, not at all. Well, I can, absolutely. Grind a lot. And if that doesn't work, give your account to somebody in China and pay them to do it. Those are two classic ways to get anything you want in World of Warcraft. But that's not what we normally talk about here. So I won't answer any more gaming questions. All right, outsourcing. So bottom line with criers, give them time. And then if they start crying, tell them they're going to have to come back later and answer it. But let them go on their way. Give them time. Say, hey, let's talk about this in an hour. Let's talk about this when you have composed yourself. So that's good. That's funny. All right. Going to take the next question. Keep putting questions in chat. I'm sorry, not in chat, what I say. Keep putting them in the extension and voting. The way to add questions just came up there. And so please fill them out. But this one I know is from Ed. He gave me some context. And he said, I do mostly industrial construction. And I deal with multiple different sub and prime contractors. How do you balance your relationship with both when your own company and the other contractors are being difficult? Okay, we're going to take a shot at this, Ed, and I'm really glad you're here because I'm glad there are people from different backgrounds. I don't know that much about managing subcontractors in your construction industry, but I think this situation is really when you're caught between multiple different entities and maybe your own company isn't doing things the best way. So, the problem with contractor and subcontractor relationships is that there's money directly on the line. And everybody's trying to maximize the money they get and minimize the issues that they have to pay for. And so in a situation like that, there's a lot of ego and nothing makes people as sensitive as having money tied up in what they're doing. So if they have money on the line, they're going to be much more difficult to deal with. And I'm not sure in the subcontractor world, you're going to have to live with that because there's no way to get away from it. But remember, that's going to trigger that hindbrain right away. So you want to try and separate the issues from the money if you possibly can. Dealing with difficult coworkers there, though, when you're trying to manage multiple people, and Ed, okay, you're adding to this in chat. I'm going to let Ed add to this in chat because it's a complicated question. For, say, a school that has a 2-acre big site, you'll work with 7 to 10 different companies always doing their own thing. Yeah, so at some level, you're really asking about program management and multiple stakeholders. There's a few things there, and I don't think it's just dealing with difficult coworkers, but a lot of this does come back to, if we think of it in relationship terms, it comes back to building trust. And so I would say, yeah, and 40 Pink Dragons, our moderator here, used to run something similar. She's used to working with a diverse crew of people in a warehouse setting, and she may be able to advise you better than I can. But what I was going to say is, she's right. Try to bring everyone together if you can. And you need to build trust, build a relationship if you can, where people are willing to work with you and compromise, or they're willing to trust you a little and give a little. Because if everyone's just dug in on, I want to do things my way and the easiest way, and you're the guy caught in the middle, that's going to be hell. I strongly recommend asking everyone questions, getting them to talk about what they're trying to do. Ask rather than tell. This is a really big thing I'm working on right now myself. I just read a book, it's not on my book list yet, called Humble Inquiry, that's about asking. And Ed says, I agree with the trust thing, but communication is hard. So my best advice there is try to build the relationship over food or drink off the site. Like, invite people out for a beer at the end of the day, bring them back to your truck and pop a cold one off the work site. I'm not trying to get you in trouble with drinking on the work site. If you go to the Roach Coach at lunch, that's what we always called it at the construction sites near my office, where they roll up the taco truck. Buy someone a damn taco. It's not going to cost you much compared to what's happening to your heart when people are fighting. So buy someone a taco, and over lunch, try and chat them up and build that trust and tease them out, because trying to build the relationship and resolve the problem while the fight's happening is going to be hell. So I don't know your exact situation, but when the plumber is arguing with the electrician, or the plumbing sub with the electrical sub, is the wrong time to need to build relationship and be like, hey, can't we all get along? Instead, that's the time where you've got to have already had the tacos or the beers with all of them, so that they can work it out. Because just like here in chat, right? Twitch is famous for trolls. And anonymity, or not knowing people, causes them to behave like dicks. But if you have any kind of relationship and you need to work with somebody again, you're much less likely to be a jerk. And so, look, I should say, there's no perfect solution to difficult coworkers. There's a bunch of tools. Let me talk about my favorite tool for a second, and then we'll do a fun activity before we do more questions. We'll do something interactive. So I have this thing I've developed over the years that I call the Chameleon model of management. And basically the idea is, for any two people to work together, they've got to adjust to each other. Well, you can't control the other person. So if you want me to adjust to you, you don't have any control over that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. The most you can do is ask me. You can say, hey, Ethan, you're big and loud. It bothers me. Do you think when we talk, you could sit down and try to talk a little more quietly? And maybe I will. And maybe I'll say, hey, this is who I am. I'm enthusiastic. Deal with it. But you can at least ask. So thing one is ask. But if the other person doesn't adapt, your strongest tool is to be good at adapting yourself to the other person's style. So if you deal with someone who's very quiet, get good at asking questions and being quiet. If you deal with someone who's loud and energetic like I am, even if it's not your natural style, you may have to say, oh, I'm about to have a meeting with Ethan. I've got to psych myself up for loud and energetic. Or I've got to take someone with me who can help me manage that. The point is, I would coach everyone who wants to work better with their coworkers, better with bosses, get good at asking the other person, what is your preferred style? And then trying to give them that style. So, for their style, for example, I like to brainstorm. I like to go back and forth really quick and exchange ideas quickly, as opposed to long periods of listening and long periods of talking. I like to go back and forth. So that's my style. So if someone asks me, how do you like to brainstorm? I'll tell them I like to iterate. I like to go back and forth. I like to debate. If they tell me that's not my style, I'm very quiet. Can I write out my ideas and you comment on them in email? I can adjust. I try to be a chameleon for the styles of my team members, but sometimes I guess wrong on their style or I forget to ask, and sometimes I get caught up in my own enthusiasm. Shane's Abs, great Twitch name. I love some of the Twitch names, by the way. Yes, I'm glad you're here. Welcome in to everybody who's joined the channel, and I'm doing very well. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the 4th. So let's take a quick break. I want to tie back to something I did in the last show about building relationship. So in the last show, I talked about this idea that this researcher discovered that two people can sit together in a room for an hour and go through 36 questions that take them from being strangers to being very comfortable with each other. And the questions go from the very anonymous, the very impersonal, to more and more personal. No, this is not staring in each other's eyes at all. That would be sad, and we can't do that here on Twitch together. You can stare into my eyes, I guess. But instead, here's how it works. You can link the questions if you want, Rex. I'm going to go through question 1 again and then question 2. So Arthur Aaron, actually the auto mod may block your link, but we can put it in later. Bottom line is, after I did the show, the first question was, if you could have dinner with anyone in history, living or dead, who would you pick? So anybody in chat, if you didn't answer last week, feel free to re-answer the question this week. Go ahead and send in your answers in chat right now because they're fun and interesting. The point is, if you could have dinner with anyone living or dead in history, ideally real, but if you want to put in a game character or a superhero, go crazy. Stick them in and let's talk about it. But the point is, that's the first question. And very few people are afraid to share, well, I would like to have dinner with Abraham Lincoln, one of my choices. Or the one I gave last week, if I could pick anybody in history, I would absolutely pick Jesus Christ myself, simply because wow, a chance to talk to the Jesus Christ. In my opinion, God. In your opinion, maybe a prophet, maybe a holy man, maybe a misunderstood crazy guy. But that would be super fascinating, right? Yeah, so our auto mod is set to block links. So we'll post the link in a little bit, but you can find it from Arthur Aaron. And it's 36 questions. So I see Teddy Roosevelt. I see the point. There's so many people to pick. And I agree with that. Steve Irwin would be really interesting, although he's dead. Julius Caesar would be incredibly interesting. I love history. The Prophet Muhammad. Obviously Pineapple Shade may be a Muslim. I don't know. But my equivalent to Jesus Christ, Nelson Mandela would be fascinating. All of these people. The point of the exercise was, when people start sharing this, and I made this point last week, you actually start feeling like you know them better. So if you're reading chat right now, feel free to join in. But when you're reading chat, you start to feel like you know these folks better. So Duke Twitch, whoever the human creator is, you know a little bit more about him. Pineapple Shade, we know a little bit more about you. Each person who shared. By the way, Ether Knight, Teddy Roosevelt is one of my heroes. I love one of his quotes. It's too long to go through right now. But I love all these choices, and I would happily have dinner with any of these people. The point is, though, you know more about them and you feel like they're human to you. So what I thought we'd do is every week now, we would do one of the questions, and we'd work our way through the whole list of 36. So question 2, which would be fun to put in chat, feel free to give your answer. The question was, would you like to be famous? And if so, in what way? Because you can be a famous athlete, you can be a famous industrialist, you can be a famous politician, you can be a famous scientist. So would you like to be famous? Everybody in chat who's interested, go crazy. Answer if you'd like to be famous and share what kind of famous you'd like to be. And then we'll go back to the questions. It's just a way of giving you guys a break, having a little interactivity, and building something that we'll do week over week. T Weirdo 3, no, you don't want to be famous. I got it. You don't want to be famous. So there's a bunch of people who don't want to be famous. Chalupa Whale would like to be a sports commentator. The Rex would like to be famous in a small niche. So for events is good, but I like your personal privacy. Yeah, it's interesting. Since I started working for Twitch and a little bit for Amazon, I've actually had people wanting to take selfies with me, which is very disturbing if you've never thought about it. Like people are like, oh my God, you work for Twitch. You're vice president there. I want to take a selfie with you. And I'm like, really? That's very unusual. But happy to do it. I've also had people take pictures with me in China because I'm really tall. So a few other answers here. People want to be famous for their knowledge. They don't want to be famous at all. I'd say this is interesting. More than half the people responding don't want to be famous. I haven't answered for me, by the way. I think I would like being famous. Number one is if I could become the US president without going through all of the politician stuff on the way, being a senator and whatever, I would definitely try it. I do realize, by the way, being president is very bad for your health. It ages you and all sorts of things, but I would do that job if I could. The second thing is I'd like to be famous for what I do right now. I'm trying, as most of you know, with the EZ Coach. My goal is to help folks grow in their career. It's to share the lessons I've learned the hard way. Oh, and hey, Pineapple Shade, I see you subbed at tier 1. I missed that. I see the notification now. Thank you very much for the sub. Anyone who subs, I give all the support that comes to this channel. We use either for costs. We just got our damn Comcast bill today, and the bandwidth to have a good channel. It goes to either that or it goes to the Washington Trails Association, a hiking charity where I'm on the board. So I very much appreciate Fungineer, who's a Twitch guy, a retired Twitch guy, cheered Bits and is on the Bits leaderboard, and I appreciate Pineapple Shade subbing. You're kind of famous. I'm from Canada. Rex is for overseas. Well, Shane Zabs, a belated happy Canada Day to you then, since that was yesterday. But the other way I'd like to be famous is with this channel. I want to help people have better jobs and enjoy their work more. People spend 50, 60 hours a week usually on their jobs, maybe more. Nice cheer there, Coffee. Thank you. You're now atop the leaderboard. By the way, for those of you who don't know Bits, it's a product I built. Each bit is worth a penny. So Coffee there ringing in with 11 cents. Love it. I love to see bits used simply because I built them along with my team. Yeah, I am technically kind of famous, Pineapple Shade comments. And I love what I've done with Amazon. That part's fun. I'm now seeking a new type I guess, of minor fame, which is to help more people be happy in their jobs because so many people hate their jobs and so many people fail at their jobs for reasons they don't understand. So, yesterday I had a very bad day. I interacted with several smart people in different contexts who aren't succeeding in different parts of their job, at least in my opinion. And it's not an intelligence problem, it's a drive and focus problem. And I was lamenting to my wife, why is it that some very smart people seem to lack common sense? That's a longer topic than tonight. Coming all the way back to end this question, and then we'll go back to the list of questions. This is question 2 on the list of 36. And you can see how they're starting to get a tiny bit more personal. So asking you, who would you go to dinner with? Pretty like whatever. Everyone will answer that. Would you like to be famous? That's a little bit more about you. Like, and this psychologist figured out that you can ease people into talking about themselves. Well, for all we talked about in a previous show about influence and now dealing with difficult coworkers, as you get to know someone and you can ease them into sharing about themselves, they will share more and more. And there's another experiment about this, maybe I'll put it on the show next time, where they tried this by having a guy, an actor, walk up to people at a bus stop, and he said one completely impersonal thing, and he said one somewhat personal thing, and then they recorded how different their reactions were. So his impersonal thing was something very close to, oh, thank God it's Friday. And his personal thing wasn't super personal. He would say to someone, oh, I'm glad it's Friday. I'm looking forward to the weekend. How about you? And it turns out that asking how about you and sharing a little bit that he was looking forward to the weekend totally changed people's responses. All right, I'm going to read chat here for a second because I dropped the bomb about why can't smart people sometimes seem to have common sense and just do what they need to do? Wow. Ed, sometime you got to share more about your life, man. You do some very interesting things. High risk fall arrest work. To me, that means mountain climbing and trying to avoid falling down the glacier in the crevasse. I think you mean something completely different, but I'm looking forward to hearing about your life over time. So, Three Gun here says it's amazing when you compliment people on their shirts how much they light up. Yes, it is. Any way to engage people at a human level. So, let's go back to questions, though. Thank you guys for indulging me while we went on a journey through relationship building with the chat. And I appreciate all of you sharing what you thought about fame. Next week, we'll add question 3, and there's 36 questions, so we'll get through this in a year or so, and we'll all be best friends. In the meantime, mods, go ahead and pop the next question up. That question is how to deal with a manager who micromanages too much and is interfering with my work. The way to deal with a micromanager is very difficult, but what I do is I ask them, I try to overwhelm them with data. I basically say, look, what is it you need to know to feel comfortable with what I'm doing? And chat says, oh, and there's a bunch of people with this question. You try to figure out why they're micromanaging, and you can ask them. I wouldn't call them a micromanager, but I would ask them politely, as is suggested in chat. I would say something like, it seems like you're a little uncomfortable with my ability to execute on this task. What sort of feedback would help you? Or It seems like you're checking in with me frequently. Is there anything I could do proactively to help you feel more comfortable? And you try to get that conversation going. Micromanagers have some reason they're micromanaging. Now, I say on the channel all the time, hey players, hi everyone. If you just have a truly bad boss that's bad across the board, there's no choice but to get the hell out. I'm really advising on how to work with difficult coworkers or bad bosses that it's possible to work with. If you have really bad, a truly bad boss who's a micromanager and all these other terrible things, you may just need to get the hell out of Dodge. But assuming they're otherwise a decent boss with one or two flaws, and look, I said earlier I had 20 bosses, 5 good, 5 bad, and 10 in the middle. The 10 in the middle had all kinds of different flaws, but they weren't terrible, so I kept working with them. In a case like that, you manage the bad boss and the micromanagement by trying to figure out why and trying to figure out what's driving it. Very few bosses that have any hope of being good are like, yes, I want to micromanage you. They have something going on that's making them fearful. They're fearing usually that if they're not on top of you, you're going to fuck up and they're going to pay the price for it. You're therefore trying to figure out what that is and make them comfortable. And that comes down to asking questions or understanding what they fear. Now, if you just have someone who's got fear in their hindbrain and they're going to control you all the time, I don't know. In a great world, you move on to a different manager if you can. Right now, in most of America, at least, the economy is good. It's hard to find good people. Go find a better job. Shane Zab says, I agree with your 10 bosses in the middle statement. It's very hard to find a perfect boss. If they are okay enough, you can usually deal with it. You know, I completely, the 5 bosses I've had that were good were so pleasant that I definitely encourage you to find a great boss if you can, but most of the time you're not going to have one. Duke Twitch, thank you for the feedback. And so if you don't have a great boss, you're going to need to just manage through it, and everyone is flawed. A lot of people have joined this stream since the opening, but if you go back and watch the VOD, I shared 2 times where I screwed it up, and 2 times is by no means the limit. I try to be a really good boss, and there are a lot of people, there's some people in this chat, and certainly a lot in my community who know me as a boss and would say I'm generally a good boss, but none of them would say I'm a perfect boss. And so every boss has quirks. I talked earlier about the chameleon skill. The chameleon skill of adapting your style, the more you learn that, the more you can adapt to anyone. So it's good if you are a boss to be really good at adapting to the needs of others. But the better you get at that skill, and here's your motivation for it, when you have a boss that's difficult, you learn to adapt to them. So I was just coaching someone who's dealing with a boss that he finds very difficult. And I convinced him, look, you should try to figure out how to work with that boss, not because you want to work for him forever, but because it's good training for you. You're going to have other bosses like him. And so you need to get good at dealing with hard bosses. So let me quickly share a book, and then we'll go on to the next question. The book I want to share is a fun book. It's an old book, but it's a fun book that if you don't want to read Leadership and Self-Deception, read this. And it's not showing up. Sorry. Let me fix that. There we go. I got to move out of the way. So this book has a great title, and it's got really good archetypes in it of the sorts of people that you may struggle with. Obviously called Dealing with People You Can't Stand. It's got a number of difficult, let's see, let me get on camera. There we go. the thing I like about this book is it's very honest, and it talks about different types of people that are very hard to deal with. Let me see if any of it's in here in all the stuff. No. Oh, now I killed it. Daggone it. Let's see. Dealing with people you can't stand. So we'll go back to this. So dealing with people you can't stand, it's got good advice on all sorts of dealing with difficult people. And like one of the types of people it talks about, I recognized as me. And that type of person is called a tank. And the issue with a tank is when something goes wrong and you say you'll fix it, the tank doesn't back off. And that, for many people, they're like, well, yeah, I screwed it up, but I'll fix it. Or it's wrong, but I'll get it right. And they wondered, why the hell won't you let it go? And the reason was I was interested in how are we going to prevent it from happening again? And so what this book teaches is how to shut the tank up and how to recognize a tank and how to stop the tank from rolling over you. And so I learned from that to try to be less of a tank. I tried to do less bad things. But what I also learned was there's a bunch of different types in that book. So that book is like, if leadership and self-deception is all about philosophy of how to treat people well and is like the deep psychology, dealing with people you can't stand is like the fast, easy version that's telling you quickly, you see this type of person, this is probably their issue, this is how to disarm them or derail them. And it's got a bunch of classic failure types for coworkers. I don't have all the types memorized, but like one of the types in it is called the grenade. The grenade is someone who tends to like be quiet, blow up. Everyone knows a type they talk about in the book called the sniper. The sniper is the person who like, shoots people down, is silent, then shoots people down with little cutting, snipey comments like, well, that's just what you think. Or even things that are context free, that are personal attacks. Is like, well, that's easy for you to say. It's that kind of like undermining that's non-specific. And those kinds of folks are really, the book runs you through about 6 or 8 of them, and you can just learn to deal with them. Like, oh, this is how I deal with a sniper. This is how I deal with a grenade. This is how I deal with a tank. And the names are memorable so that you're easy to map onto what it is they do. Let's see. Regarding your tank style, how do you go about pulling that back while not shutting it down completely? Ultimately, that's part of who you are. So how do you balance the two? So Shane, those questions should go in ideally into our question widget, but since it's on something I was talking about, I'm happy to address it here since it's contextual. Look, my whole career has been learning to manage myself. And so basically as a manager of first dozens and now hundreds of people and at some points close to 1,000, I have a loop running in my head all the time that's asking, am I doing this well? Am I doing this well? And it's not paranoid, but I'm always trying to be self-aware of both what am I trying to accomplish and am I trying to accomplish it in a way that these people can hear and that my team can interact with. And so what I can do is realize that I can continue to ask someone something, but without making them feel threatened. I can explain myself. And so let's say I work in tech, obviously. Let's say a system goes down and I go to the engineer whose software broke and I say, what happened with the system? And they tell me, blah, blah, blah. We didn't plan for enough load. We didn't scale, so we had to add some servers. And I can say, okay, did you add those servers? Did you add more capacity? And they say, yes, we did, or we're doing it, or whatever. At this point, I can keep pushing on them in a way that they'll feel attacked, or I can say, well, I can explain myself and say, look, I'm very interested that we avoid this problem in the future. Do you have a plan for that? Or do you have an approach for that? And maybe they say not yet. And so I can say, well, uh, do you agree it's important over time we avoid this or whatever? And basically, can you come back with a plan? Or the tank approach is to say, well, we need to have a plan to prevent this problem from reoccurring. And can you have that plan to me tomorrow morning? Or I need a plan right away. Or what are you thinking? Those are tank approaches. I try now to ask questions. And it's a little bit leading. We talked about the Socratic method being leading earlier. That's what I try and do. All right. So I got to say, by the way, I love the discussion that's been happening in chat between Ed and Pink Dragons. One of the things I wanted to talk about, and I got distracted earlier, is how I want this community to form. We have a bunch of folks in the community, and if Devin Nash is still listening, Devin brings a lot of the Nash Nation with him and supports what I do on his show. And a lot of the Nash Nation are Twitch natives, mostly gamers. We had Greasy Weasel, I think it was earlier. I lost the name. Greasy Wheezy, who was clearly asking gamer questions. And they're coming from a Twitch perspective, and they're young and they're early in their career. And I love that you're here because it's you I want to help. At the same time, we have a bunch of people from my network that are professionals in an office. And then we have folks like Ed, who come from a completely different industry that I don't know that much about, but Pink Dragons does. One of the things I hope with our community over time is that you'll coach each other. And you hopefully will end up being able to help each other improve as much as I'm able to help you. And I also learn from you as a community. And that's what I want to do. So when you jump in and share what you're thinking, or tell me what answer doesn't work for you, or ask me questions I don't know how to answer, you push my thinking as an executive. And I want that. And so I appreciate everyone who's here. And I just wanted to take a time out to explain, hey, we're all here to get better together, I hope. And I will do everything I can to help this community, but sometimes you need to help each other and make connections in chat or through Whisper so that you can work with people who can help you with your specific issue. Because there's a million issues I can't help with. Someone very early, and he might have left the show about this, he might have left the show way earlier, was asking a question about an interview. Tonight's not where we're talking about interviews. His question might be further down, and we'll see if we get to it in the questions. But someone in the chat could definitely give him some advice on that. So I appreciate you doing that. And Ed, yeah, you work with your hands, not with your fingers. My brother was in construction. And he told me he's much older. My brother's 18 years older than I am. And one of the things he said to me when I was going to school is he said, you're going to really want to work with your mind, not with your back if you can. Now, that was his opinion. You may love what you do. But he definitely had a sore back some days from building houses and other stuff he did. And he was advising me, get out if I could. So, all right, let's go back to questions. How do you deal? The mods will post this up. The next question, and feel free to vote. We've gone for a long show, so if there's other questions you want me to answer, make sure you go into the Q&A widget and vote them up. Ed, I don't like going to the gym either. So, how do you deal with a yes man? A manager who only wants to hear yes to everything they say, yes to whatever their boss wants, either out of fear or laziness. If you want to, first, same answer I always give. If they're a universally bad boss, get away. Come to this channel, learn new skills, improve yourself, get out of it. And if you have to deal with a yes man, though, a manager who wants to hear yes to everything, um, I guess I'd go to, you say it's either out of fear or laziness. Um, I would try in this situation to understand what their boss wants so you can get ahead of it if you have to. Like, this is a bad situation, what you're describing. You're sometimes going to have to say no. I would try and understand what can help your manager hear no. In other words, they're being driven by fear of their boss. Okay, I try to get them on my side and say, look, we can't do all of that. What does the big boss need that would take them out of this? And yeah, it says, chat says, this sounds like a middle manager who's struggling. It is. Um, but if you have a boss in that situation, I would try to catch them when they're not asking for something and saying, look, we often get run around because of what the big boss needs. How can we get ahead of that? How can I help you? Um, what can I do to be different? And so you got to work with that as best you can and try to understand. Basically, at this point, you're managing through your bad manager to try and manage their boss. That's the issue. Let's see. We got somebody who's got to go here. Mods, it looks like 005 here is needs a timeout. All right. Mods are on it. 005, see you later soon. Chat, I apologize. We've got some Twitch folks in who we use this platform because it gives us live interactivity, and we get a few people that we need to help see a better place to be. So, bottom line is you manage a boss like this by trying to understand what they need. Okay. And yeah, we've got some Twitch staff in here also. So these folks will find their way out real quick because luckily, all right. I'm just going to take time and deal with this real quick. All right. Okay. Well, anyway, yes, think Banhammer can actually. So I think we've got somebody who's okay, fantastic. All right, we're gonna move on to other questions. And it's wonderful to have the help of the staff. I appreciate that. I appreciate you jumping in. That's one of the benefits because I know a bunch of people at Twitch from working there. I have some staff in chat and they help regulate some of the problems. But it's the way it goes. Anyway, we're going to go on to the next question. This one that was asked is really tough. Basically, you got to figure out what the big boss wants and try and work with them and try and get your boss out of his hindbrain with the fear and laziness. And that's, again, relationship. And there you have it. Piker, we don't take questions about Twitch. I don't speak to questions about Twitch or Amazon, but feel free to apply online. Okay. Next question is, how do you handle bosses that spew process improvement BS? E.g., look how far we've grown since Project X. When for most of the ants, it doesn't seem like the problems have been fixed. All right, this is a, and we're going to move this one up here in a second so it shows for everybody. Our mods are busy, so I'll go ahead and do that. And we'll pop this one up. So, how do you handle bosses who spew process improvements? Well, and when the problems haven't been fixed, I guess I'd ask questions or show data. I would try to show some data about what's still a problem. But I would also try to ask questions. Uh, and so I would try to um, I would try to engage them about, and you can ask good questions, get a discussion going with them, like, hey, what do you think of the new process? Or could we go back and do a post-mortem on the process? But basically you ask questions like, hey, what do you like about this process? Or how do you see it actually working? Um, but we talked earlier about when you disagree with a boss, try not to make it a public argument. Instead, go back and if you can, talk to them in private so they're not threatened and their image isn't threatened. Ask them questions, bring data, bring other people, but try to make the discussion about the problem and not about the boss spewing. Because this book um, we talked about the book Leadership and Self-Deception. If your internal belief is your boss spews a bunch of BS, it's going to be really hard to talk to that boss and get them to hear you because they're going to feel that you think they're a dumb shit. And if you're approaching your boss basically trying to be nice, but where you secretly think they're full of shit, they're going to feel that. And so if you can't get past the fact that you think your boss is full of it, you can't build a relationship or you don't think they have other skills you can respect, you're going to need to find a different job and a different boss, or you're going to need to suffer. Those are the reality. If you generally have a good relationship with your boss, but that boss has a process spewing problem or some other problem like that, then you need to find a way to get them to discuss that topic without it being about them. And so make it about the process. So that's my answer there. Chat's lively tonight. We got a lot of good stuff going on. Okay. So we'll answer a couple more questions. We'll call it a night. How do you cooperate better with a coworker who has a very negative view on challenges and opportunities? Oh, thank you for whoever asked this question. This is really hard. I tend to be an optimistic person, and someone who's down on everything I find really difficult. All right. And I don't know. I see you said it's your question. Give us a pronunciation guide for your Twitch name. Dr. Druino? How do you want that said? Anyway, when I find someone negative, you're gonna get sick of me saying ask questions, but I try to ask them, what do you see is positive about this, or what do you suggest instead? You try to get them, talking about what they see as an alternative. You put it back on them because they're probably like what I talked about in the book I brought up a few minutes ago called Dealing with People You Can't Stand. They're a sniper, right? The negative people are often snipers, and they're the type that's just shooting at shit, and I get really sick of it. And so after a few times of that, I basically ask them, hey, what is positive you can add, or what would you suggest? And sometimes, particularly if you have a group environment, you can set the rules for them and you say, we have a rule here, which is if you're going to criticize what we're doing, you have to make your own suggestion. So a simple example of this, years ago, I used to go out to lunch each day with a group of friends, and we'd get sick of going to the same places that were near our office. And so what would happen is someone would say, where do you want to go to lunch? And people would say, well, not McDonald's and not the Olive Garden and not Taco Bell. And what we had to do is we changed it to a rule that if you shot down the suggestion of where to go, you had to make another suggestion. And so I would try to do something like that. I'd try to build a group vibe that made their constant negative difficult. And thanks, coffee. It is a good rule. I would try to do something that made it so that they had to be positive. And if I couldn't do that, I'd ask, do you have to work with them? Now, this question says, how do you cooperate with a coworker who's very negative? I guess I'd try, again, I've said a few times, build relationship. I'd take them to lunch. And in the Chameleon sense, I would say, hey, let's call them Fred. Fred is my favorite placeholder name, probably because I don't have anyone that I work with that's named Fred. And and so with someone like this, I would take them to lunch. Thanks, Banhammer, for the bits. I appreciate the big cheer. You just displaced coffee as number one, though, right after you used the badge. So let's use the random name Jeff. I'm going to stick with Fred rather than being misinterpreted which Jeff I might be talking about. But in the spirit of the Chameleon, which I talked to you about earlier, I would take them to lunch and say, your style is very difficult for me. It feels like you're generally criticizing what we're doing. And could you change your style in some way? Could you do things differently? Could you offer other suggestions, or could you ask your questions in a way to get at something positive? But I would try to ask them to change their style. And if I couldn't do that, I'd at least try and have a discussion with them and ask them to shut the hell up. And if I couldn't do that, I'd try and have a discussion with them about, look, I get that your style's different and you tend to see the problems. How can I address those positively? So, all right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, we got a question that got voted up huge. So let's roll to that. How do you handle a boss who plays favorites? What if you aren't the favorite, yet you don't want to alienate, or what if you are the favorite, but you don't want to alienate coworkers? All right, this is a great question. First, bosses shouldn't play favorites. But the reality is all bosses have people they work with better and worse, and it's going to seem like favorites to somebody. This is really hard. I will tell you a story. I don't know if he's still here in chat. I haven't seen him show up in a little while. Earlier he was on. My producer, Awesome Dave, was here. And Awesome Dave has worked for me in 4 different jobs, and now he's producer on the channel, even though he's working at Sweet Green as a full-time job. But to avoid this sense of playing favorites, what I did when he worked for me is I said, look, Dave, everybody knows that you and I went to college together. Everybody knows that you're my friend. So let's, we're going to take care of some more idiots in chat. And so we're going to take a second here to say goodbye to some folks. Bye-bye. And yeah, so we don't need people in chat who are difficult, who aren't here to improve themselves and are just trying to attract attention and be off color. It's not welcome. It's not what we do here, and luckily they will all find themselves someplace else to be on another Twitch channel. The good news, and I want to thank the whole community for this, why are we seeing idiots in chat tonight? We're seeing idiots in chat because there are more of you watching than ever, and as the channel grows in popularity, we climb up the rank of channels in the Just Chatting category, and when we're on and Just Chatting, you attract some jerks. And so the more we're in, yeah, it says, oh my God, you never finish your thought because of the idiot. Well, I'm going to get back to it. So the story about Awesome Dave, yeah, I can, Banhammer, I can do that in a second. We've got a mod on, he's just multitasking a little bit. And if I need to do that, I can add you as a mod here in a minute. So I'm going to finish this question, though, come hell or high water. What I did with Awesome Dave is I told him, look, I'm going to have to treat you harder so that people just think it's vaguely fair. People know that I know you. They know that we're friends. They know we've worked together. So I'm going to push you harder and you're going to get less from me. And I set it up that way from the beginning. And so I pushed him harder and did less for him. And that way I played anti-favorites because I said, you're going to have to live by a higher bar. Now the key is he accepted that coming in the door. He was warned that those were the rules if he wanted to work for me at Amazon. So when he was reporting directly to me, I gave him the hardest time and the least benefits. That's how I tried to address it. Now, some people still thought I was playing favorites. I can't do anything about that. But how do you handle a boss who plays favorites? Basically, it comes down to, are they doing it intentionally or not? If they just have their favorites and they're going to play favorites, obviously, I would say you have a bad boss and just get away. The second thing, of course, is you can try to become the favorite, but then that's the rest of the question. What if you are the favorite and you don't want to alienate coworkers? I would talk to my boss and I'd say, look, please, it's important for us to have a good team for you to treat me equally and to treat other people well, because if it looks like you favor me, it's bad for you and bad for me. So I would talk to the boss and say, I really appreciate our great working relationship and I want you to succeed and blah, blah, blah. But don't treat me in a way that makes it hard for me to work with our coworkers. Don't treat me poorly, or don't treat me in a way that makes them feel bad. And if you want to do something for me, let's talk about it offline, but hold me to the same standard. That's how I would handle it if I was the favorite. Because you never want to be that person who's seen as the suck up. People will start to undermine you. Edgy, watch it. We love you, but bag lickers is not the most flattering term. And yes, there's a bunch of those folks. All right. If you have a boss who plays favorites and they're really going to do that in a very obvious way, like maybe they just have people they like, that's hard. Everybody likes different people differently. And so I've had bosses that they play a sport and someone else plays the sport with them. That's tough. You can't fault them for if they're a golfer and you're not a golfer and they play golf with somebody else on the team. You got to let people be human. But if they're treating their golf buddy way better and giving him more raises or whatever, then you have to get out, or you have to bring it up to them and say, look, it's not right, and see if they'll change. So that's my advice there. But if you're the favorite, don't rub it in. All right. Okay. The next question is, when is a bad boss just not boss material? I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I feel like I talk about it all the time. You can't get your boss removed, but basically when a bad boss is not boss material is when a boss has so many flaws or problems and they're not interested in any feedback that they're making your life miserable. If you have a choice and you're not going to starve to death, and anybody here in this channel is usually busy improving themselves and learning to do bigger and better things and growing themselves, they have choices in their jobs. And if you have someone who's so bad and not interested in learning and not interested in feedback and trying to improve or work with you, then it is time to get the heck out. Find a different job, find a different boss. If you have someone who is willing to take feedback, then try and work with them. And that's when there's still boss material. But a bad boss is not boss material when they're a jerk and they're not interested in learning or being different. When they're on a power trip and they just want to order you around, you may have to suck it up and get an education, get a skill, find a new job. But life is too short to work for bad people. Um, Look, you spend 50, 60 hours a week at work, probably, or you will. There's people on the channel who don't do that now, but life in America is a lot of hard work. Life in the rest of the world can be even harder. Try not to work for assholes, right? Like, you're going to work 20, 30 years, 50 hours a week. You guys can do the math on how many hours it is. I share this in the channel a lot. 70% of people who leave jobs because their boss, they don't like their boss. And so it's the single most common reason for leaving a job, and go ahead and do it if you have to. But don't work for, like, don't suffer forever. All right. Okay. I wanted to get to this next question. It'll probably be the last one we do tonight. Because it's a long question, but it's interesting. And it may not, I'll read it off because the widget may not even show all the text that's here. But it says, my manager often loses her temper in meetings, yelling, accusing, rolling eyes, storming off. I understand when work is frustrating, but I don't think this behavior is generally, okay, there's the whole question. I'm going to try and move out of the way. I don't think I should even bother if I'm not certain it will be received well, or if I am concerned about how it will impact how she treats me. No, that kind of behavior is not generative or professional. That kind of person has an issue. And I want to be careful here. I have lost my temper in meetings. I've worked in Amazon 14 years, 4 of those at Twitch. I've probably yelled 2 or 3 times in 14 years, but I've done it. And it's not good, and I'm not proud of it. And I've had to go apologize to people. But we're not talking, I think, here about someone who yells once every 5 years. It seems like this is someone who does it a lot, and they have an issue, an anger control issue. I think you could see, if I had this manager, the first thing I would do is, clearly if she's doing this in meetings, everybody notices it. So I would ask the other people in the meetings politely over lunch, hey, has anybody ever talked to her? So we'll give this manager a name, Susie. Has anybody ever talked to Susie about what she does? Has anybody ever talked, has Susie ever listened? Has she always been this way? Like, I would try and find out context. And then I would say, does anybody have any idea how, we could approach her about it? And yeah, anytime you're going to give your boss feedback, there's this danger it will make them worse. And if they're already an explosive tyrant, that's really bad. And so what you're describing is someone who's pretty difficult and may fall into the really bad boss. But there's other stuff you could do here that's more aggressive, and dangerous if you're willing to take a risk, but you already are dealing with someone you might want to get away from. You could record them and show it to them. Very confrontational. But it comes down to, do you have that relationship where you can have the discussion? And so, standard recipe here, I've said it before, I would consider inviting your boss to lunch or drinks or anytime you can and saying, hey, I notice in meetings you sometimes get very frustrated. This is the chameleon, ask the other person to change. I'd say I find it hard sometimes when you get upset and frustrated to follow what you'd like us to do. Is there a way we can change that dynamic? And you make it like, I'd like to be more successful for you, and I find it hard when you seem to get irritated. Is there a way that we can help change so that you don't feel irritated? Or is there a way I can work with you better? You try to make it, it's like the dating thing. It's not me, it's you. It's, yes. So the comment in chat, what you've gathered from me is I like food and drink. What I believe there is that people are easily bribed. Food and drink is an awesome way to get at most people's hearts. We talked early in the show about the amygdala hijack and how the hindbrain can interfere with people. Well, the amygdala is the lizard brain, and the lizard brain likes to be well fed. And basically, people are tribal. We're evolved to deal with our family and our tribe, and the most tribal act is eating together, like the meal around the campfire. And so it's a lot harder if you just think about it. It's really hard to be hostile with someone that you've had dinner with, or to be hostile at dinner. Like, you think about this manager who rolls her eyes in meetings, yelling, accusing, etc. It's unlikely that she would do that in a restaurant over drinks, like with a crowd around. That kind of behavior is something people do when they feel safe and in power and like no one's going to witness them. They don't generally do it in public. And so you try and build that relationship that makes them feel like they're going to be watched and seen. And so I would try a few of the tactics, though, of influence them in a group. Ask them how you can change the dynamic. Ask them how you can be different. Ask them if they're open to feedback. Hey, I struggled a little bit with our last meeting. Would you be willing to talk about it? But I wouldn't, the last thing I would do is say, hey, you're an ass in meetings and you often yell at us and I don't like it. Now, what I will say is you don't have to take abuse. If you have any other option in your life, if someone is truly unprofessional or abusive, you can also try, we talked about this on another show, if someone's a bully, call them on it and just say, hey, stop yelling. It's not okay. Now, they may fire you. That's okay. Like, go find a better job. But you don't have to be bullied. And so if someone really is bullying you, you just call them on it and you tell them you're not going to take it. Now, that may cost you your job. But if your job sucks, so what? Like, there are a million jobs out there. I know they're hard to find. We're doing a show at the end of July. I'm going to do a show on an effective job search. Come to that show. I think it's July 29th, but I don't have it memorized. Let's see. We have our website up here. Yeah, somebody says, could I define abuse? Abuse is someone yelling at you for no reason. Abuse is someone being an ass for no reason. Yeah, July 29th, I'm going to do winning job search. Come back then and let's talk about, I'm always telling people find a better job, so I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to do a show on how to find a better damn job so that you don't have to put up with abuse. But yeah, abuse is such a wide topic. Look, abuse, yeah, it's not anybody who makes you uncomfortable or upset occasionally. Abuse is denigration. So for example, if someone is accusing you falsely and saying you're lying, or if they're attacking you personally, if they're saying, hey, you're an idiot, that's abuse. When someone says your idea is bad, get over it. They're welcome to their opinion. If someone says, I don't think your work is good enough, and they're the boss, they're allowed to have that opinion. You should ask them why. If they say you're stupid and you're a jerk, or many worse things, but if they're attacking you as a person, that's where you say, I don't have to put up with that. Like, that's unprofessional. If you want to talk about my work, we can talk about my work. But if you want to talk about me, you will do so respectfully. And most people do not have the balls, if you look them in the eye and say, you will speak to me like a fellow human being with respect. If they want to go after you and say, no, you're a fucking idiot, you walk out. You walk out that door and you say, I'd rather starve than deal with someone with no pride. Or you walk straight to HR right there and you say, great, let's take this conversation to human resources right now. And then you go. You do not let them bully you. This rarely happens in any worthwhile workplace, and I've never seen it happen in Amazon in my experience. But I say absolutely, and I'm glad we got to end on this note, if someone's actually going to abuse you as a human, you take them on and you tell them that is not okay, and you will stop and you will apologize right now, or I'm leaving. And then if they don't shut up and apologize, you say, great, my lawyer will be talking to you tomorrow, goodbye, and you leave. You know what? I can tell you this. Most companies are scared to death of being sued over the behavior of their employees. And if you say, I'm bringing my lawyer, and you go to HR, that person will be crawling the next day, usually, unless you've done something wrong. If they've caught you stealing, you'll be out of a job. But I'm going to read chat now. But yeah, you do not have to live with abuse in your life, at least not here in America if you have marketable skills. Now, I have some audience from all over the world. You may live in a country where, people can abuse you, and I'm sorry for that. Try and get the hell out of that country if you can, but that may be impractical advice. But here in America, you don't have to put up with abuse. So now I'm fired up about that. And I hope whoever is being abused and whoever wrote this question, don't put up with it. Come to this channel, do whatever you need to do to get the skills so that you can afford to walk out the door with your head held high. All right, we're good. We've talked about lots of stuff. We've gone an hour and a half. We've had a huge audience. I thank you all for staying. Couple quick reminders. My next show, I'm going to be doing Prime Day with Twitch Prime down in Las Vegas. We're going to have a show on Apex Legends coming out of Vegas on July 13th. I hope you come see it or watch it online. Second, my next show will be on July 18th. It's called Smarter You. It's actually going to be about how do you systematically go about building your skills so that you can be more effective and get that better job. The show after that is July 29th. It's the one I just ranted about effective job search. We're going to talk about how to be better at finding the job you want and the toolkit to go do that. And finally, I'm going to be back on the Nash Nation, Devin Nash's show on July 22nd at 2 p.m. Pacific. We're going to go over my schedule and a day in the life of what the hell the boss does at work so that you have some view to understand it. Okay, I got to go calm down. So with that, I've had a lot of fun today. Thank you very much for being here. Big audience today. I appreciate all of you. I always love it when the chat can ask me something that gets me fired up. It's more fun to be energetic and engage with you. I'm looking forward to having you all back in 2 weeks. We'll share some of the stuff we did at the Las Vegas show for Twitch Prime. If you haven't ever joined Twitch Prime or tried it, Ed, I'm glad you find the show interesting. I appreciate you being here. And, I love, I'm going to debrief with my mod, 40 Pink Dragons, about the conversation you had. I couldn't read it all as it went by, but I appreciate every word, everything you've done. So, let's see. Looks like we got one more person who may need a timeout. So anyway, appreciate also all of you put up with a few people from Twitch chat visiting us who don't understand that it's a professional channel here to improve your career and to grow you. But we can always excuse them from our presence, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks. So with that, have a great night. See you soon. Hi, I'm Ethan Evans. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this show. To follow us on YouTube, please click the bell icon in the bottom left and subscribe. Also, you can find us live on Twitch, where we answer questions interactively. Further, we have a Discord community where not only I, but other members of the community team up to answer your questions interactively. Hope you've enjoyed. Thank you.